And so we've basically been in COVID longer than we were open. And so, yeah, it's been a challenging journey for the last year and a half, especially for the hotel business. But we've also learned a lot, about hospitality business as well as sustainable tourism and all those things.
Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Breaking Silos with me, Sophia Jamel. As mentioned in the introduction, this episode is part of a series, a special edition in collaboration with the East-West Center, and it's part of their Spring Virtual Institute for their academic fellows this year. So I'm really excited about this initiative because the questions that will be asked to our guest speakers will be from the fellows themselves. And the fellows are young Southeast Asians who are doing great work in terms of environmental sustainability and nature conservation. So I'm really excited for this collaboration. Today we'll be talking about ecotourism and the sustainability around ecotourism. And I'm very happy to have Tomo Hamakawa from Earth Company, which is based in Bali. Earth Company runs ecotourism, a hotel, basically. Would that be correct, Tomo?
Yeah, more or less.
More or less, yeah. So, obviously, Tomo can give a lot of insight on, the feasibilities of running an ecotourism site, especially now in these difficult new normal times as well. So maybe, Tomo, maybe you can tell us a bit more about yourself and how did you get into the line of work that you're in?
Great. Yeah, well, thank you so much, Sophia, for this invitation to speak to you and to the participants in the Virtual Institute. My name is Tomo. My wife and I started an organization called Earth Company about 6.5 years ago. We're based in Ubud, Bali. I myself from originally from Japan, but have lived in many different parts and corners of the world. But we call Ubud home now and for the past few years, and we'll be here for in the foreseeable future. So we at Earth Company do a number of different things, and the main reason why we started the organization was really to support changemakers in the Asia Pacific region. We call them impact heroes, and we select one impact hero per year, and we support them for a 3-year period. And we do basically everything and anything we can, including fundraising on behalf of them, marketing support, coaching, consulting, leadership development. So that's kind of the main work that we do at our company. But based on that first kind of business or program, a number of things have evolved. From there, the second business that we started a few years ago, based in Bali, was an educational program, really to give people idea of the social innovation and sustainability initiatives happening in Bali. There's a very exciting place to be in terms if you're interested in that kind of stuff. And so we work with high schools, universities to host these kinds of programs, and we were able to do that in person before COVID. And the last year has been quite tough because we've had to shift a lot of them online, and others have simply been canceled. And our hotel business actually grew out of that educational program because we were receiving groups of high school students and university students, and they were coming to learn about sustainability and social innovation, right? And but we didn't have our own place, and we put them up in different guest houses or 3-star hotels, and but a lot of them, a lot of the accommodation facilities didn't really embody the values that we believed in and we were preaching during the day in these programs. And so, we were talking about these issues and, figuring how these sustainability or environmental and social issues can be solved. And then at night, they would go back to their hotel rooms, which weren't the most sustainable. And they were actually contributing to a lot of the problems that we were discussing during the day, right? So we felt this dilemma, this contradiction. And we felt like, well, we really, would like to have our own place that manifests the values and vision that we believe in. And so that's why we started this place called Mana Earthly Paradise 2 years ago. That is, sustainable and conscious in every way possible. There are some things we haven't been able to do, but we want to make it, as conscious as possible. And that we opened 6 months before COVID, and that was the worst time to start any business, but especially a tourism business. And so things were going well for the first 6 months. Occupancy rate was going up, and things were looking good in second half of 2020, and then everything shut down. And so we've been, basically closed for about a year. We haven't been completely closed, but just the number of guests have been really, really low. And so we've basically been in COVID longer than we were open. And so, yeah, it's been a challenging journey for the last, year and a half, especially for the hotel business. But we've also learned a lot, about hospitality business as well as sustainable tourism and all those things. So, yeah, so that's a brief introduction of myself and our work.
Wow, right. I'm particularly interested in how it started, how Mana Earthly Paradise started. It wasn't the initial idea. It was actually an offshoot of an education program. And you saw the need to supplement the program with accommodation. I think that's a really interesting point because people might not realize that these sort of accommodation or tourism facilities are sort of an extension of your own educational programs. I mean, this is something I think our fellows can definitely take away from, an experience that I think would be definitely fruitful, useful for them to know.
Yeah. So in some ways, it's really an NGO or educational company that's running a hotel, which is quite unique on its own. And so, our sustainability features or sustainability and social, contributions, all those things at Mana are really an extension of what we have been doing, before. And it's really putting shape to what we believe in.
Right. It reminds me of when I was in West Java doing some field work, and I was visiting some pesantrens there, and their foundation had also started dry hotels. So hotels, but in the spirit of Islam, so it's a dry hotel, and just keeping to their values. So I thought that was an interesting side business for them, and also providing income for their foundation to do more charity work. So I see some parallels there.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, your point about COVID and how you've been in COVID longer than Mana Earthly Paradise has been running. I mean, that must be really tough. And some of our fellows have some questions about that. So maybe just to start, like, how have you been coping? You mentioned that you're sort of closed, but I think you're doing some other activities at the same time.
So I think as with all, tourism businesses, we were, for the first few months of, this COVID period, we were really trying to figure out how to survive, right, and what to do. And in the case of Bali, we had kind of a lockdown period for about 2-3 months when, there was no movement whatsoever. And so we were essentially closed. And then July, August, actually domestic travel started to take place. But the domestic tourism in Indonesia isn't exactly looking for sustainable tourism, especially in terms of mass tourism, right? They're looking for the Instagrammable locations, both in terms of food, in terms of scenery, all that. And so we actually had to shift our target audience a little bit to be able to cater to that domestic audience. So if anything, I think COVID has really challenged us to expand our target because we used to be really focused on overseas travelers, especially those those are conscious travelers who are looking for a place like Mana. And so we've had to change and expand our target. So that's one. And we've fortunately we've not let go of any of our staff, about 20 plus members. They've all kind of reduced their times to 40% of their engagements. But we've employed them throughout, and our restaurant is open, catering to the residents here in Bali. But yet, the volume is still very low. And so for the last couple of months, we've actually, been basically shut down completely to be able to renovate in anticipation for tourism reopening in June, July, or so they say. Indonesia is supposed to open in June, July, but who knows whether that's really going to happen. But yeah, we've financially we've been in a fortunate situation to have had this kind of reserve, but we're basically getting lower and lower into our reserves, and it's really a matter of question how much longer we can survive, and I think that goes for all tourism businesses in general.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm here in Johor, Malaysia, and all the small little hotels are pretty much shut.
Yeah.
And Johor depends a lot on the Singapore market.
Right.
So a lot of the retail has really gone downhill here. Your point about catering to the domestic market more rather than the international market, and you said that they're not necessarily interested in the sustainable stuff compared to the international market. So when you were trying to expand and engage them, did you find that it was perhaps compromising your values, or was it also an opportunity to promote more awareness to them?
Well, it's actually, I mean, we didn't really have to change, our sustainability practices, especially for the hotel part. It was really about the restaurants, right? Like, how do we get domestic travelers to at least come eat at our restaurants, even if they don't, stay over at our villas. And so, in terms of the restaurant, we wanted to add, a bit more kind of, for example, like Japanese menu, right? Indonesians love Japanese food, and our original concept was kind of Indonesian Japanese fusion food served at the restaurant in kind of an organic and conscious way. But we thought, well, maybe Indonesians traveling to Bali who aren't looking for Indonesian food, right? If they want good Indonesian food, they're not coming to us; they're going somewhere else, right? But if they might be interested in having healthy Japanese food instead. And so we thought, well, maybe we should highlight that a little bit more, because that's it's pretty amazing how much Indonesians love Japanese food these days. So so that's one example of how we've kind of shifted our communication.
Okay, cool. We have a question from Ruli Azwa from Indonesia. He asked, I would like to know more he's basically asking about the economics during COVID. With building Asia's next generation hotel, is this sustainable ecotourism able to compete with other model hotels, especially in Ubud, Bali? And has the income increased or decreased during the pandemic? you pretty much responded to that.
Yeah.
What's the competition like with the other hotels?
Yeah. So, I mean, in terms of Bali, I think there are several hotels that take sustainability seriously, and they're really gone. Have shown their commitment to sustainability, and I think all these businesses are running as businesses, right? They know, people are not going to come unless it's comfortable to stay there. People don't want to compromise, comfort and hospitality just to go sustainable, right? Just to go eco. And so it's for sustainable hotels, it's really balancing the sustainability aspects and the hospitality aspect. And so it's really not, one or the other. It's really about having both. Yeah. And I think this, and from, talking to different owners of sustainable properties, I've kind of come to, it's not a conclusion, but probably a working hypothesis, and that their sustainable hotels have one of two ways to compete in the market, right? And one is to put sustainability kind of front and center and say, we are a sustainable place. And that's pretty clear from their websites, from their social media and all that, right? And I think Mana, for example, falls into that category. And then mostly that's because we are an NGO, that's kind of in our DNA. The other camp of sustainable hotels is that, sustainability is really baked into their design, into their concept, but they don't really use it as a marketing centerpiece. They want people to come because it's beautiful, because it's a great place. But also, when travelers come, they find out, oh, this place is actually very conscious and sustainable, right? So it's kind of an added bonus. And so, of course, there's no right or wrong, approach to sustainable hotels. And for us, running Mana, we definitely don't know. We've only been in operation for a few months before COVID, and hopefully we can prove that this approach, this model also works and can be profitable. But I think either way you go about it, I think it's really finding your voice. What is your organization's mission, right? And what do customers relate to? What do the guests relate to in terms of your business, right? And I think whichever approach you take, comfort and hospitality are extremely important. And like as I said, people aren't willing to sacrifice, comfort, so that they can be eco, right? And so it's really having kind of both and finding that balance between the two.
Right. I mean, at the end of the day, customer is always right. So, it's customer relations. How do you treat your customer? It's very business in that way, and it's not and I like the fact that you mentioned about the social and hospitality part, not just the sustainable environment part. One of our previous guests on the show talked about ESG, environment, social, and corporate governance, and she comes from the more social part of ESG, and she was talking about, there's so much social part of it tends to be left out when you talk about environmental sustainability, and especially when it comes to hospitality, you are talking about people, whether it be your guests or whether it be the people that you employ. And at the end of the day,
the community that you're part of, right? Or the village that you do business in.
Great point there. We have a question from Usha from Malaysia on regenerative tourism. I understand that a possible limitation towards urban regeneration can be financing it. Are there any successful financial models of these regeneration methods, like Mana Earthly Paradise?
Yeah, I think in terms of building, a sustainable hotel or sustainable property in an urban place, especially like Singapore or Kuala Lumpur, Indonesia, or Jakarta, I think can be extremely expensive. So maybe the question is about how do you finance such such an expensive venture. I mean, I think that gets into the area of kind of impact investing, right, and or ESG investing, and I think that there's increasing demand for that kind of businesses from investors. And we, for example, when we raised funds to build our place, so initial kind of capital expenditure, we had loans got from two impact investors, one from Australia and another one from Japan. And they simply loved our concept and our vision and wanted to contribute in some ways. And we decided to make it into a loan scheme rather than equity for a number of reasons. But and so we've had the fortune of working with them. It's been a real pleasure to have these people who really understands our concept and our model on board as investors. And so, I think there are people who are willing to back these kinds of regenerative models or conscious businesses or sustainable businesses.
If I could just ask, you mentioned that you preferred to do a loan system rather than an equity system. So, I mean, just for the benefit of the fellows who are listening to this, maybe you could explain a bit more on what's the difference between equity and loan with these impact investors.
So I think those are the two broad categories of investment. Whether you're borrowing money and you pay back with interest, or you give shares of your company to an investor, right? And for us, because one, we really didn't know how this was going to turn out, so we wanted to have kind of full control over the fate of this baby. And so that's one reason why we didn't want to have kind of equity partners from the beginning. And second, we really don't see ourselves selling the company in the foreseeable future. So we don't have any plans to cash out. And so for those two reasons, we thought, it would be just a lot more simple to make it into a loan where we receive the money and then we pay back with interest. Yeah.
Less strings attached, I suppose, when you don't have to.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Kim-san also has another question related to Mana Earthly Paradise. He has one specifically on the wastewater treatment system. What is Mana's method for collecting treatment for treating the water to reduce pollutants, and how cost efficient is it? Is there an affordable price to have these sort of water treatment systems in Mana?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we have these things called wastewater gardens at Mana. We have a few of them next to the villas, and their septic tanks are part of that wastewater garden. And I guess before talking about the wastewater garden, we do provide like soap, shampoo, and conditioner that's 100% natural, so that we encourage our guests to use these natural products as much as possible, and so that whatever goes into our system is actually has less artificial chemicals in them. And in terms of wastewater gardens, the way it works is we basically let plants do their job in cleaning and filtering the wastewater. And so when we look at the quality of the water, so after it goes to the septic tank, so the gray water that comes from the toilet, the shower, everything goes to the septic tank. And of course, when it goes into the septic tank, it's quite dirty. After it comes out of the septic tank, it's already quite clear, but it looks a little bit gray. And then we have this basically garden with plants, and then the water kind of flows through this garden, and then the plants basically filter the water. And so by the time it comes out at this end, the water is pretty much clear and transparent and odorless, and so that's how we try to clean up our water as much as possible before we release it, to from there on.
Excellent. Maybe you could tell us a bit more about the features around Mana Earthly Paradise. So you've got this water system, water filtration system. What other features are there? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess in terms of the water, if we go upstream in the water kind of chain, we also collect and filter rainwater because water shortage is is a huge problem in Bali as well as in many tourism destinations. And so when we started Mana, we wanted to be self-sufficient in terms of water consumption as much as possible. And all the accommodation villas have like kind of thatched roof, so it kind of looks kind of grassy. But then the main building with the restaurant and office and the shop actually have these panel roofs, and that's where we collect the rainwater. And then the rainwater is stored under in a water tank underneath the parking lots. And then that water gets filtered through a multimedia filter going through UV lights and sand and all these things. And so, that clean water is then fed to all throughout the property, in the kitchen, the toilets, and the villas. And they're all drinkable already. So the water that comes out of the tap, comes out of the shower, it's already drinking quality. So that's another sustainability feature. We also have solar panels, and so 100% of the lighting is powered by the sun. We also use regular kind of grid electricity because we have kitchen appliances that need quite a significant volume of electricity. And people want to charge their computers, things like that. So we also have it's a hybrid model of using solar panels and also grids. So those are probably the main features. And then we also do in terms of the food, we do this farm to table concept, and so we try to grow as much vegetables as possible in a permaculture way on site, and then the vegetable grown gets used at the restaurant, and then any food waste that comes from the restaurant then is composted and then brought back to the soil for the farming. So there's kind of a circular loop in terms of the food production and food provided at Manas. Yeah.
Excellent. And how many of the staff are from around the community?
Yeah, so when we were building, the village actually asked us to employ at least 40% of our staff from the small village where we're located, and so we've kept that promise. And if you consider like the general area, I would say about 80-90% of our staff is from the general area, not just that specific kind of village. And so we have some Indonesian staff that are outside from outside of Bali, but it's a very small minority.
Right, and I suppose the staff had to go through quite a bit of training before they joined.
Yeah.
I mean, before they actually did work.
Yeah, so I would say for all the ground staff, even kind of mid-level staff, none of them really worked at like a sustainable hotel, right? Because there really aren't that many. And so, and to be honest, I don't think a lot of them even cared about sustainability or the environment before joining. They just, for them, I think it's like, oh, a new property has emerged in my village, and they're employing people. I'm going to apply. And when they applied and got the job, they realized, oh, they're sustainable, conscious, right? And so it's very much a new thing for most of them, and sharing our vision and passion, you know, in sustainability is one big part of our work, and it's really without having them on board, we can't really accomplish anything, right? So I think that team building part is extremely important. But what we hope is that, for them, the 23, 24 members who work at Mana, my hope is that they will, bring back what they learn at Mana into their villages, into their homes, and so that they bring positive influence in terms of sustainability and kind of social contributions to other parts of their lives as well.
Excellent, excellent. We have a question from Sophia Roth from Cambodia as well. In my country, those ecotourism destinations always have the same issue, and she's referring to Boracay in Philippines.
Right.
People leave trash, pollute the water, disturb the nature. There are a lot of failures in ecotourism. How can we ensure that ecotourism gives benefits to locals and the environment instead of harming it? I have met conservationists who provide trekking and homestay services in their protected area. When there are tourists, they have less time to do the patrolling, and that gives the opportunity for illegal logging to happen or hunting of animals. They would love the idea of closing their site periodically, but they would have to generate money for hiring rangers and patrolling. What model should the ecotourism have to protect the environment?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I think it's a very common challenge or important challenge to think about how to balance sustainability and economics. And if the business or the initiative doesn't bring immediate financial benefits, then no one really is going to support your initiative, your business, right? But I think going back to his or her question, I mean, I think how the description sounded like high volume tourism, right? And I don't think such a thing as like high volume ecotourism exists. And if you have busloads of people coming in, there will be environmental, cultural, social impact on the local population, right? And so I think by definition, ecotourism, sustainable tourism is going to be lower volume than the kind of the mass tourism that we know of. And so it needs to be controlled. It needs to be managed, right? And really needs to be, the people who come to these places really need to respect and care about what's happening locally. And so I think when I was interviewing the owner of an eco hotel last week for an upcoming episode of Asia's Next Gen Hotels, it was really interesting how his name is Norm, and he's been in Bali for like 20 something years. And what he said was really interesting is he was in conventional tourism before starting his own eco hotel in Bali, and the stark contrast between conventional tourism and sustainable tourism is the quality of the guests. It says people who are interested in staying at his eco hotel are really interesting people that care about people and the environment, right? And therefore, the conversation he has with these kind of travelers is so interesting, right? And whereas in the conventional tourism model, people are there it's like a transaction, right? It's like, I'm here, I'm going to take as much advantage as possible, and I'm going to get out, I'm going to go back to my country, right? And so it's a very different model, very different interaction. And so I think I think in terms of the sustainable tourism model, I think both the people who come will benefit, but also the businesses that receive these people also benefit from having, quality interactions. From these people.
So, in a way, would it be correct to say that ecotourism is still very niche in the sense that because it's medium volume, not high volume, low to medium volume, it's you're catering to a smaller group of people. Um, the price will probably be higher than a high volume
Yeah,
tourist area.
yeah,
Um, yeah, and it also it's a matter of how educated or how
yeah,
aware the tourists are in terms of
yeah,
environmental sustainability.
yeah, yeah. No, I think so. Yeah, I think it's still a niche market, and yeah, I think it's still a small minority of people who are looking for that kind of experience when they travel. Yeah, and it's certainly the people who care about society and environment at home as well as in the destinations that they go to, right? And so people who come, enjoy mass tourism, who enjoy getting on big buses and going to different places, probably have a similar lifestyle at home, right? And so they probably don't really care about the environment or about their communities. And so I don't think there's much difference between what they do in their home environment and what they do in their destinations.
Right, right. Maybe maybe we'll go to a couple of questions from the fellows that talk about how do we communicate environmental sustainability. Okay, so Trisha from Philippines says she's just commenting on the articles they've read. Most
Yeah.
of these articles imply that tourists should practice a more mindful way of traveling. However, the way tourism and traveling are advertised on social media encourages a culture that focuses more on the number of destination spots one can visit in this lifetime and less on being mindful about where one is going and how to travel with the least impact. That's just like what we've mentioned
Yeah.
now. Um, Megan Alperwood mentioned in her article that it is a deep human instinct to travel and share the experience with others. How should tourists communicate their travel experiences in a way that supports sustainable tourism? Furthermore, how can owners maximize social media in the promotion of their businesses that gives more weight to mindful tourism?
Mm, good question. um, I
I
think
might just
this.
add, I just might add
Sure.
Sophia Roth's question is pretty similar to
Yeah.
Tricia. The standard of living keeps rising. People own things they don't need. Media always promotes consumerism. Which tools should we use to promote the minimalism and eco village life?
Hmm.
Kind of similar, but slightly
Yeah.
nuanced.
Yeah. I think this these questions point to uh, an important tension between short-term gratification and longer-term joy or meaning, right? And I think social media is is an embodiment of that short-term gratification. Is both an embodiment and is also a amplifier of that, right? And then I think what sustainable tourism is trying to do is really to move away from taking Instagrammable photos and uploading them to a more meaningful connection to the people and to the nature that you immerse yourself in, right? And so you take the time to travel, go to a place, and what the most meaningful way to travel and stay and enhance your stay is to be able to connect with nature and the community that you visit, and also the people, maybe the staff working at the hotel or owner. You meet the owner of the hotel, whoever it is. It's really about the people and nature, right? And you can never substitute kind of the short-term gratification with these kind of longer-term meaning and value. And so, having said that, I think a lot of sustainable businesses also need to rely on social media in order to attract people to come to their places, and also communicate, the values that they believe in, right? And so it's definitely not black and white. You can't operate in a single world. You have to manage, both worlds quite well. Yeah, and so I think it's in terms of how do we communicate travel experiences. I think social media is one way, but I think having sharing it on different kind of more deeper platforms, I think will be even better. So having conversations, having discussions, online discussions or in-person discussions about experiences, also, keeping the relationships that you built during your travels, I think will add even more depth to your experience. And so I think that kind of communication or interaction, I think it should be added to the kind of the social media posts that you make after your trips.
Right. Okay, cool. We have a couple of questions on the environmental impact and invisible burden of
Yeah.
ecotourism. Okay, so we have a question from Kim from Thailand. Who's asking about the environmental impact from over tourism and corruption that she experiences or she notices in Thailand, which is also prevalent in other Southeast Asian countries. Um,
Mm-hmm.
not not everyone understands about the ocean sound, or rather, I think she's talking about noise pollution.
Yeah, I think in Boracay, they because there was so much dancing and heavy music, people didn't even hear the ocean sounds. And when Boracay shut down, I think the locals actually started hearing the sounds of the waves, which was surprising and was very new to them. I think that's
Right,
what this is getting at. Yeah.
right. So there are there are definitely people that prefer drinking at the bar and dancing at a club. How can we? How do we deal with people when how do we deal with the conflict between people who don't care about the environment and those that do? Uh, what about the comparison of income and profit between nightclub beaches and the ecotourism version on the beaches?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I mean, I don't think this question is really, not just about, tourism destinations, right? Going back to the earlier point, it's really about lifestyle choices, right? And so these people who love nightclubs probably go to the people who go to nightclubs in Boracay or in Bangkok or wherever also probably go to these places in their home communities, in their own lifestyle, right? And so I really see, people in kind of this bell-shaped curve, right? There are people who are very, very conscious and very interested in sustainability, and they want to make this world a better place. They want to change their own lifestyles. All these people, right? And we might call them innovators or early adopters. And then, a lot of people are in the middle, and then there are the kind of the so-called laggards who adopt these kinds of new lifestyles or new technology or whatever at the very end of a trend, right? And I think we can't convert everyone. We can't make everyone into sustainable freaks, right? Or innovators. And it's always going to be a bell curve. And it's really about how do we slowly increase, the innovator, early adopter mindsets among the the main population. And because I often talk about like people who are involved in sustainability, like myself, like I don't think my job is to try to convince climate deniers. I don't think that's not. I think it's wasting my time. My time is probably more well spent if I try to convince those who are probably in the middle or leaning towards sustainability to want to do more. And I think there are enough people out there who are keen to travel sustainably, who want to stay at sustainable hotels, and that's really the segment that we should be targeting. And so, yeah, I just don't think it's kind of a black and white. Do we choose these people or the nightclub people? It's really like, how do we grow this segment of people who are interested in similar things as we are?
Right. I guess, I mean, that's a really good point because at the end of the day, it's like knowing your target audience. And it's from, you can't, because like whether you're doing a business or whether you're an environmentalist, you need to know who you're speaking to.
Yeah,
You don't want to be just speaking to the converted. You want to be talking to people who probably need a bit more of a push, but not necessarily
yeah,
the people who are in denial.
yeah,
And that's a really good point that you mentioned because I think for our fellows, like when they're trying to think of who do they communicate their message to,
mm,
I think this is a really good point for them
yeah.
to think about their target audiences.
Mm.
We have a question
Because
from
we,
John.
there's
Oh, sorry.
this.
Yeah.
Sorry, just to expand on that, the people talk. This bell curve is usually, referred to as the diffusion of innovation or diffusion of technology, right? And so it can be an iPhone that comes to the market, right? It's like who adopts it first, and all that. It's just, I think it's the same with with things like sustainability, and people say they're about 2.5% of innovators, right? And 2.5%. That's actually pretty huge if you think about, the size of Indonesian population, for example. That's 250 million people, right? Times 2.5. That's already millions of people, right? If you think about the Asia Pacific region that has, about 3 billion people, 2.5% is what, like 70 million people. That's a huge market, right? And so I don't think you have to think about the 97.5%. If you can claim 2.5% of the population, that's a huge business opportunity.
Right. Great point. Yeah. John from the Philippines asks, as a development professional, how do you account for and uncover invisible burden? Can we consider this as an indicator of sustainable tourism, i.e., less hidden costs slash invisible burden would be more sustainable?
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's a good question. I think, at the end of the day, it's really about understanding what goes into your business, the inputs, and what goes out of your system, right? And for Mana, we actually created this environmental performance dashboard, that keeps track of how much electricity we're using month to month, how much trash we're generating on a daily basis, and not just waste in general, but by classifying it in terms of organic waste and inorganic waste, things like that. How much water we're utilizing, things like that. And so for us, it's that has allowed us to really understand what the inputs are in terms of resources, and also what the outputs are mostly in terms of waste. And I think that kind of tool makes the burden visible, right? Making the so-called invisible into something more visible. And we've just started using it in the last few months. And so the goal is for us to use it for several months to have enough data to see what is the trend overall, right? And also what should our target be? Because we don't even know our target. One doesn't know one's target unless you know the current situation, right? And so unless we have good data over several months on electricity usage, on trash generation, on water consumption, then only then can we start to set KPIs, and then to introduce measures to try to meet those targets. So that's how I would advise kind of properties to think about the visible or the invisible burden.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. Um, we have a couple of questions on how to get started with ecotourism if you're just starting out. Two questions one from Feliciana in Timor-Leste and June from Indonesia, who you're familiar with.
Yes.
Yes. So Feliciana is just talking about her experience in Timor-Leste, and obviously Timor-Leste has immense biodiversity. She says our ocean harbors 1/3 of the world's whale and dolphin species, and various sea turtle species. We promote the integration of local traditional practices in policy making. One such example is the incorporation of the Tara Bandu practice, which is a traditional law invoked to restrict activities and thus protect natural resources in an area. I think this is other parts of Indonesia also have this practice. It's just not called, it's just in a different name. I think in Sumatra, they call it lubuk larangan. You're not allowed to fish in a certain lake, for a period of time. However, she says there's still a lot of illegal fishing going on where there is no practice of Tarabandu. What is your advice for our country to achieve sustainable tourism, considering our tourism destinations are just being discovered in Timor-Leste, she means, and we do not have a large investment in local tourism infrastructure? Where can we start first?
Yeah, very good question. So I know a little bit about Timor-Leste because our first impact hero that we selected and supported is from Timor. Her name is Bella. She's also she studied at University of Hawaii through East-West Center scholarship. So there's actually a connection to this virtual institute as well. But Bella, what we did for Bella was actually to start a kind of ecotourism place outside of Dili, in a place called Mobisi, which is a couple hours outside of Dili. And yeah, so we totally understand, the challenge of starting, sustainable tourism from scratch when tourism itself is almost non-existent, right? For foreign travelers traveling to Timor-Leste, I think there's limited information on Timor in the first place, and also you have to connect through Singapore or Bali to get to Timor, and so it's really not on the tourist map yet, right? And but I think in terms of domestic tourism, as far as I understand, a lot of kind of expats, living in Dili, are looking for places to go outside of Dili on long weekends or short vacations. And I think that's probably a good first target segment in terms for foreigners, living in Timor, who are looking for that experience. But that's a pretty small market. But I think I don't have groundbreaking advice in terms of how does a country get started in terms of tourism. But I think it's really, one thing to think about is this idea of, making quick cash to, thinking things in a more sustainable way. And, and I think this idea applies to everything that we do, right? And it applies to agriculture, right? If you want to make, quick cash from agriculture, of course, you're going to put as much fertilizer and as much pesticide as possible to get, one round of harvest that you're going to sell and make quick cash. But of course, if you do that, then you destroy the soil, you destroy the land, destroy the bacteria, right? And so you're not going to get the fertility of the soil will only decrease over time. And I think it's the same thing with sustainable tourism, right? And it's really about how can you respect and leverage the natural and cultural resources in the long run, right? And maybe that it's not about making quick cash. And of course, you need to make immediate income for your business to be sustainable. But it's really how do you see the community, or how do you see the business in 5 years, 10 years, 50 years, And so I think if you stretch your time horizon far enough, then you'll start to understand what needs to be done now in the next few months. So I think that perspective, I think, is really important as you develop something new.
Interesting. Great. Final question from June. Sustainable tourism always becomes an interesting topic for me since I worked with your company, Tomo-san. I remember the first task for my research about eco hotels and their sustainability practice around Asia. Regarding that task, I became more inspired by their practices, including eco buildings, management, and social impacts. It's not just impacted it has not just impacted the environment, but also the community around them as well. Based on this, I just wonder about some things. Through my research with some friends, there's so much potential for community-based tourism in Indonesia, but most of them are still not familiar with the concept of sustainability. In your opinion, how can we start to promote this kind of concept to the community? If we met with the community-based profit orientation, how should we deal with this?
I think it's, if you want to start a community-based tourism or community-based initiative, then obviously the community needs to be involved. And I think it's really about sharing the vision and the passion with the local community, right? And so it's understanding what their vision is for their own community, what they see for, is what they want to do in the future. And I think getting that community, buy-in and ownership, I think is, will go a long way. And the other way to think about it is, if you don't have that kind of buy-in ownership, I think businesses will fail in the long run. And I think that's true in every part of the world, especially in these parts of Southeast Asia. So I think getting that, like sitting down with the village elders, the village youth, if they really want to do this kind of community-based tourism, and if there is kind of that local leadership, then I think that will go a long way. Rather than you or June or some friends thinking it's a great idea, it needs to really be built from ground up with the people who will be driving it in the long run.
Right. And I would just add that, especially in this part of the world, to engage local communities, that takes time to build that trust. It's not just a one meeting and like, okay, it's over a period of time. They have to be comfortable with you, and that takes time. So it's definitely a lot of patience.
Especially if you're an outsider, right? And people have doubts about your intentions, and understandably so, right? And I think it takes time to convince people that you're in it for the long run, right? You're not just coming to take advantage of the cultural and natural resources, and you want to do this. So like demonstrating that commitment, I think is really important.
What was your experience in that regard?
I mean, I think that's something that's still ongoing, but we've, even kind of just, we actually haven't purchased the land where Mana sits. We have a 25-year lease, but just having that lease, meeting with the landlord, with the landlord family, and also when we started our hotel, we met with the local village leaders many times. And they communicated their expectations. And as I said before, employing 40% of the staff from the local village was a clear expectation from their side. And we also make, financial contributions to the community in terms of donations and, things like that. And so I think, I think we can do more, but I think so far, I think it's worked out okay.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, yeah, I mean, and I think you're doing a great job and having surviving through this
Yeah.
difficult period right now. Uh, um, so I mean, just to wrap up, I have a couple of final questions which I ask all the guests on Breaking Silos. What does breaking silos mean to you, and what advice would you give someone who wants to break
Mm.
silos in addressing environmental challenges?
Mm. So breaking silos, to me, is trying to be collaborators with people who you might think are competitors. So turning competitors into collaborators, I think, is really key, right, in breaking silos. And I think it's connected to the idea of collective impact, and this idea of sustainability, and our survival as species or as a planet really is up to us whether we can work collectively or not, right? And so it's at the end of the day, it's really not about does one business do better than the other. It's really, if you zoom out of this, zoom out of immediate concerns and think about our collective future, our fates are really intertwined. And so I think it's really not seeing others as competitors, but as collaborators, right? And I think that's especially true in sustainable tourism. And we as a hotel are very much new to this area of sustainable tourism. We started just 2 years ago, and people that I've talked to in the last couple of years have been doing this for decades, right? And so we're a complete newbie, we're a complete novice into this area that people or generations have been building. And what's really amazing about this sector or this industry is that people are so willing to collaborate and share. And I think there is this idea of building this collective impact together, and there's not really competition, but it's really about collaboration and synergies.
Nice. I really love that. Collaborators instead of competitors. That really ties into what one of our previous speakers also mentioned about the importance of building alliances and just reaching out to people to work together. I mean,
Yep.
yeah, I really like that statement. Thank you, Tomo. Yeah, so thank you, Tomo, for your time.
Thank you.
And thank you everybody for listening in to this episode. I'm sure you've learned a lot about ecotourism, sustainable ecotourism, and links to Mana Earthly Paradise will be available in the description below if you'd like to know more about it. So yeah, thanks Tomo once again, and
Thank you, Sophia. It's a pleasure.
yeah, from me, Sophia Jamil and Tomo Hamakawa. Bye.
Bye.